Hello, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Welcome to the final Third Thursday History at Home lecture series from Schoharie Crossing State Historic Site for 2024. This is going to be a good one, and full disclosure, I saw that this program was being offered a while back, was not able to make it, so I thought, hey, let me get this one for work here at the site, and then I have no excuse to miss it. So we are here this evening for Queens of Quackery. Kayla Whitehouse is the executive director of the National Bottle Museum located in Ballston Spa, New York. She received her BA in Classics from Colgate University and an MA in Anthropology from Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. She has worked in a variety of museums before her current position, including the Milwaukee Public Museum, Discovery World, and the Chudnow Museum of Yesteryear. She lives in Albany, New York, and she's here to present this fantastic program. Please welcome Kayla Whitehouse.
Thank you. So yes, my name is Kayla, and I'm here to talk about Queens of Quackery, female proprietors of patent medicine. And okay, so just a brief overview of what I'm going to be talking about today. First, I'm just going to start with what the history of patent medicine is, and then I'm going to get into a couple of notable women in patent medicine, specifically Lydia Pinkham and Mrs. Winslow from Mrs. Winslow's Soothing Syrup. So first of all, the first question lots of people ask is, what is patent medicine? And the idea of a patent originally came from the letters patent, which was something that, businesses would receive from royalty. And it was basically just a commendation showing that they approved of their products and, wanted to support their business. Gradually, that did change, and we got more into what we think of today as a patent. So this one here in the middle is actually the patent from the United States Patent Office for the Wright brothers flying machine. And you can see it doesn't really give much of a description about anything. It's mostly just like, oh, it's a flying machine, and that's all that they include. The one over here on the right is a modern patent for a pharmaceutical company for one of their medicines. And all these little tiny words and numbers are actually all of the chemical composition, and so that way you could recreate it, because in order to properly patent something, you need to be able to say what it is exactly, so that no one, if someone does copy you, you can say what that is. Patent medicine, in the way that it is used, is not like today's modern patents. It's more like the one the Wright brothers had. They patented the idea, or it was basically like a trademark of their brand. So it was just like the brand name was what they were selling, and marketing and keeping as their own. They did not release any contents at first. It was all kept as very, very private, very secret, because they didn't want anyone to know what they were using in their products. So the biggest, the era of patent medicines was between 1870s and about 1930. They did extend a little bit on either side there, but this was really just the heyday of patent medicines. And there was a prolific amount, just hundreds of different types of brands. And, just everywhere you looked, there would have been, a different patent medicine, different versions of the same type of medicine. There are a few main overall types of patent medicine. So one of them is bitters, and those would have been used for, just like stomach issues. There was sarsaparilla, which was an anti-inflammatory type of medicine. Cosmetics, so things like, here to grow your hair extra long, or to make your skin nice and smooth and beautiful. Pond's cold cream is technically, had its start as a patent medicine. It was a gentleman named Pond, so he, went with the frogs and the pond theme for his advertising at first. But so, all different types of cosmetics to help you look and feel beautiful. Another really big type of patent medicines, big category, was female remedies. And there was a couple different types. So some female remedies were designed or intended to help women with what they called, female complaints. So if you had issues with menstruation or menopause, or even like during pregnancy, there was different medicines that could help with, alleviate those symptoms and, ease pains from that. And, some of them like, oh, here's like iron pills, that's something that if, women lose, they often get more anemic if they're on their cycle. So something like that would help, cure your anemia and help you feel better. But another type of ones were what they called here, like these sort of female regulating tablets. And a lot of these medicines were sort of couched in very vague terms because they were actually abortion pills. And they, due to legal issues at the time, they couldn't necessarily just advertise we're selling abortion pills. So everything was very secretive. It regulates your cycle. It prevents you from missing any of your monthly periods. And women would sort of read between the lines and realize that if you're trying to make sure you keep your cycle coming every month, it's because you're not getting pregnant or eliminating a pregnancy that you might have. So that was like a really big common type of medicine that women would rely on, but it had to be sort of like secret about, careful of what they said. And then a lot of patent medicines were just cure-alls. So you can see like the Hamlin's Wizard Oil here. It's for rheumatism, but also for toothache, backache, sore throat, colic, cramps, diarrhea. Like you could cure everything with this one medicine. Other companies would have a whole like family of medicines. So they would sell different pills for all the different maladies you might have. But if you knew and trusted that brand name and that company, if you had a cough, you would buy that brand of cough medicine. If you had a sore throat, you'd buy their sore throat medicine. If you had constipation, you'd buy their brand instead of trying out a different one. But people wanted to have, if you had a successful medicine, you wanted to keep going and make sure that everyone was able, you could sell something to everyone. And one of the reasons why these were very popular were because of the way that pharmacies in the 1800s were set up. People didn't really have doctors very often. You would have had to have, a private physician, which would have been expensive. And so if you had any, if you were sick or you had any, health problems, you would often just go straight to the pharmacy. And the pharmacy there, the pharmacists were trained in medicine as well, and they were able to write a prescription. And then you can see here is a lovely picture of a pharmacy and all the different bottles on the back wall with all the different possible ingredients. They would, diagnose your issue, and then write up a prescription. And then the prescription was basically like a recipe for what you needed. And they would mix it up and give you the pills or the tincture or the, tonic or whatever it was. And then you could take that home. So these are a couple of different prescriptions. We have a prescription book here at the museum from the early 1900s. So this is one at the top here, and it's caffeine citrate and phenacetin. Phenacetin is a pain reliever that's no longer used, but this is basically the same thing as, Excedrin with caffeine or the migraine, Tylenol. So it's a pain reliever plus caffeine. And you can sort of see actually right here on the prescription, it does say headache. So this is really just, it's the same measure, the same type of medicine, but they didn't have the over-the-counter brand name. Similarly, this prescription on the bottom is for zinc oxide mixed with Vaseline and cold cream. And that's actually just a diaper rash. It says to apply it liberally. The zinc oxide is still used in diaper creams today to, help clear up any diaper rash that baby might have. So, they were using the same sort of things, but it would take time, and you couldn't just, if every time your baby got a diaper rash, you had to go to the pharmacy, it could be a lot. So people leaned into using these patent medicines because it was something quick and easy. You could just pick it up, buy it off the shelf, and keep it at your home. And so whenever you had any sort of issue, you were able to help cure that yourself without having to run and talk to the pharmacist. And a lot of the patent medicines did work to a point. So they were, used ingredients that were often common in like folk remedies. So, here, this is senna. Senna is a plant that is known to have laxative properties. Okay. So if you're constipated, you can take laxative senna. That would help with your constipation. It also has things like peppermint, which can, be used to ease and calm your stomach, an upset stomach. So it's something like that. It would, work, and then you didn't have to wait in line for the pharmacist. These pennyroyal pills, this is another one of those female remedies. Pennyroyal is a folk remedy plant that people use to induce an abortion as well. So once again, you can see that there's really no description of what this medicine is for. It just, oh, ladies, it's important to you. They're the best. So you had to sort of be able to read through the lines and just know, like, oh, I see, I understand what they're saying. This is for, if to regulate my cycle in case I've needed an abortion. But a lot of them also did have a lot of alcohol and narcotics. So they would have cocaine, they would have opium, some of them had cannabis in them, heroin. So if you had, some toothache, I'm sure if you put the cocaine drops on there, they would feel better. So and your throat hurts, have a little bit of cocaine, have some alcohol. This advertisement here on the left was comparing some of the top medicines. So a celery compound, Peruna was another common brand name patent medicine, and then a bitters. And comparing the amount of alcohol in these to common drinks. And you can see the bitters is almost like 50%. That's almost as bad as whiskey. To the point where the Ladies' Home Journal actually released an advertisement in 1904 endorsing Budweiser as a means of promoting temperance. Because if you're trying to keep dangerous alcohol out of your home, it's better to have a nice low percent alcohol beer than it was to actually like have the bitters. And some people were, taking these patent medicines and drinking them in order to get drunk. So the Ladies' Home Journal was like, we want to support temperance and get rid of alcohol. So instead of using these stomach bitters, you should actually just go ahead and drink beer. So like they did work for different reasons. Some of them had those the plants and the extracts, and then they also had all of the good stuff, the narcotics and the alcohol. So you would feel good, and you would be able, so it was a quick and easy thing that would actually help your symptoms. But another reason that really led to the patent medicine industry taking off in the 1870s is because in the 1860s, the United States had our Civil War, which led to a huge opium addiction. So men were, obviously they were fighting, they were getting injured. The battlefield conditions weren't necessarily great. The hospitals weren't always great. People were in a lot of pain. And the hypodermic needle had just been introduced in 1844. So suddenly people had a very quick, easy way to relieve the pain of soldiers by injecting them with heroin and injecting them with, other opioids like that. So men were leaving the battlefield addicted to these narcotics, and they needed something to turn to once they were no longer had that access from the doctor. And a lot of them did end up turning towards patent medicine for that alternative. Patent medicines also just really did have a lot of advertising. So they published, obviously just the typical sort of advertisements in the newspaper. They also would release what was called like trade cards. And, some of these trade cards, they would include them with the box. So you could get one if you bought the medicine, or they might give them away for free at the store. They might include them with, a package of soap. When you buy some soap, you could get a trade card. And they had these beautiful illustrations. So people collected them for the art. Some of them had little sections of a story. Some of them had jokes or puzzles or things. So it kept people interested. They wanted to buy more because they wanted to finish the whole story. They wanted this series of beautiful drawings that they have. And they wanted to, be able to like collect them and trade them and show them off. But it was very effective advertising because, sometimes like if you have a calendar hanging on your wall for, a specific brand of bitters, you're not going to buy someone else. If you need to go to the store and buy some bitters, you're going to buy the same one that you're used to using. So there was just a prolific amount of advertising, and people were really inundated with these patent medicines. The end of the patent medicine era, it took a while to like really die down, but it started in the early 1900s. In 1905, Samuel Hopkins Adams published an expose called The Great American Fraud. And in this, he looked at a lot of the different patent medicines that were on the market and just released a list of, what they were supposed to do and then the ingredients that they actually had. Um, they did like a scientific study to determine like the analysis of each product, because since they didn't list the ingredients on the label, people had no idea what they were actually taking. So something like here, this one here is Liquozone, which was designed, it claimed to be liquid ozone, which is not actually a thing. In reality, what it was sulfuric acid, sulfurous acid, and just some water. So you're literally just drinking water and hoping that it will cure this huge long list of all these different diseases and issues you might have, like asthma, coughs, consumption, fevers, skin diseases, malaria. All these things are supposed to be cured, but you're really just drinking acid. And people were very upset. They're like, I thought I was taking medicine. I want my family to be healthy. That's why I buy these medicines. So there was this, huge pushback, and it led to the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. And what that act did was it required that all alcohol and all narcotics be labeled on the bottle. And so a lot of the medicines, it started to die down because people were looking at the bottle being like, this thing is full of heroin. This one is full of cocaine. This one is, so much alcohol. Like, I don't think I want to use this one. I'll try to find one that doesn't have these narcotics in it. And so it did reduce the sales of some of the medicines. But it wasn't really until that act was revised in 1936, the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act was released, and that one just banned the sale of the narcotics completely. So, between those 30 years, they were still selling them. It was starting to die down as people were realizing what was included, but it wasn't until the 1930s that, they actually prevented the sale of all the narcotics and in the medicines. So I would like to talk about, there was a lot of different proprietors and big name brands, and I wanted to go into just two of the biggest name brands in patent medicines who happen to be women. And I have what I would like to call like a queen of patent medicine and also one of the queens of patent medicine. So the queen of patent medicine is Lydia Pinkham. She was born Lydia Estes, February 9th, 1819 in Massachusetts. Her family was a very big, involved family in a lot of different social movements. They were major abolitionists. They were involved in temperance and feminist movements. She actually was originally a Quaker, but left the Quakers because they didn't have a strong enough stance on abolition. And she was, very firm believer in that. And some of these, supports, did interact with her, affect her career later on. She eventually married Isaac Pinkham in 1843, and they had 4 children survive to adulthood. Unfortunately, they did have one child who died young. And Isaac was kind of a job hopper. He started out when she met him, he like sold shoes, and then he did something, worked at this other place, and he did another thing. Eventually, he got into real estate and lost everything. And they were very, very broke. And it was around this time that someone had owed Isaac a debt. And instead of paying the debt in money, what he did was he gave them a recipe that he had for this herbal remedy that his family used. And Lydia, cooked up this remedy just on the stove at the house and found that it was very helpful for her and her daughter and her daughters-in-law. And she traded it with, family and friends. And it was very successful. So they decided in 1875 that, why don't we sell this product and actually sell this medicine and market it on a wider scale. And it was her son who actually like took charge of the business side and was like, let's go into actually selling it. And one of the things that he thought came up with, the idea that was very revolutionary, was they actually put her face on every single package, every single bottle. Um, and they had a ton of advertising. And like I said, in this time period, there was just a lot of advertising for patent medicines. So people saw her face everywhere. People joked that she was the most famous woman in America, that she was involved in there was drinking songs that wrote about her. The newspaper once published her photo instead of the president's wife. Like her photo is just everywhere. Everyone knew who Lydia Pinkham was. And this was extremely revolutionary because people did not do that, particularly women. There were some men, they called them the bitters boys. So some of the gentlemen who sold bitters would occasionally put their image on the bottle, but it had never been done by a woman. And this, is likely influenced by her strong feminist ideas, so that she was very much the face of the company, and she was very much involved with the company. The other thing she did was she would have women write to her. So people would write in and say, like, I have all these horrible pains and weaknesses, like, what do I do? And she would write back and she would give them advice, and they would publish these letters in the newspaper, in their almanacs, in, magazines and catalogs. And, other women would see, oh, well, her medicine was able to help this woman over here. I wonder, I have the same symptoms, I have the same issues, I should try and see, if it helps me as well. And it was really good, advice and a good marketing strategy, because women were seeing it not just as, an advertisement. It was like a good review. It's like as if you had heard it from, another user. And so people liked hearing that. But this was also very revolutionary because, as she was writing to these women, she was teaching them different ways to deal with their medical issues. And at the time, women's health was very stigmatized. So, if you didn't have a, private physician, chances are you wouldn't ever know what was going on. If you had issues during pregnancy or childbirth, you would just have to ask your mother, your grandmother, maybe an aunt or a sister, someone who had children before you, something like that. But there wasn't really any published medical knowledge for the average person. So women were writing in and they're learning more about their bodies and about, their cycle and about pregnancy and how to deal with any issues that they might have. And so she was really helping these women and empowering them to take charge in their own health. So this is the original recipe for her compound, which is called Lydia Pinkham's Vegetable Compound. I actually have a bottle of it here. We have some lovely bottles here at the museum. But so this originally contained unicorn root, which has been found to have estrogen-like properties, life root, which can hasten labor and reduce pain. That one is, unfortunately, we've discovered it is carcinogenic. Black cohosh can reduce menopause symptoms. Pleurisy root, which will regulate your hormones and reduce cramping. Fenugreek seed also reduces pain and cramps, but also promotes breast milk production. And then they mixed it all together with 18% alcohol. So even though Lydia Pinkham was a very strong favor of the temperance movement, she understood that the best way to get these good properties out of these roots and these plants and stuff was you needed to make an extract with the alcohol. And then the alcohol also works as a preservative, so that if you put this bottle up on your shelf, next month when you need it again, it's still going to be good. It's not going to have gone bad or rancid or moldy or anything like that. So, this was all based on folk ideas, oh, you can use this plant. But, modern science has also examined these plants and seen like, oh, it has like estrogen-like properties. So that might actually help you if you're having issues with menopause. The same with the black cohosh, like it can help you with your, period pain. It can help after giving birth and help during birth. So, this was really marketed for women, specifically for all of those female complaints, like they called them, but it has, these ingredients that have properties that could help with those things. Lydia died in 1883. They continued to use her image for advertising. There was a bit of a scandal at one point because people were writing in and receiving these letters back from Mrs. Pinkham. And then a magazine published a photo of her tombstone. And they're like, she's dead. You guys, I don't know who you're talking to. And the company was like, well, you're talking to her daughter-in-law, so it's still Mrs. Pinkham, so it's okay. But they survived that little scandal and continued to be sold, and they're actually still available today. They have modified the ingredients a bit. It's still got some of that same stuff. So it's still got, you can see like the black cohosh is in there, the pleurisy root is in there. They've lowered the alcohol a bit, and then now they've added things like iron and calcium and some vitamins and stuff. So it is still, available. It's not regulated or evaluated by the FDA. So, there's, people say it works, it might not necessarily work, but it is still an extremely successful product that is still available and has the, good chance that it would help you with some of these female issues. And so Lydia Pinkham, not only did she create this wonderful product that seems to work, has, good chance of working here, and it was very successful, but she also really just increased the knowledge of women's health and helped pass that information on to the average woman who might not have access to a medical professional or a medical journal or anything like that. And so because of this, Lydia Pinkham is the queen of patent medicine because she did do a fantastic job, created a great successful product that worked and just really helped women with her product. Which does bring us to the quack of patent medicine. And Mrs. Winslow is who I am calling the quack. So Mrs. Charlotte Winslow was a pediatric nurse, and she developed her soothing syrup while she was working as a nurse to help treat her patients. Her son-in-law and his business partner were the ones who actually sold the product. So she came up with the idea, and then they took that idea and marketed it and ran with it. And she really had absolutely no involvement in the company at all. She was basically just the name, the brand on the label. So this is first sold in 1849, and it was marketed to mothers with young babies, and it said it would help relieve teething pain. And so here you can see, a couple of the advertisements. These are some of those trade cards that, just once again, just really beautiful artwork, nice little idyllic home. Everyone's laying in bed, getting ready to go to sleep. They're all happy and smiling because she has her bottle of Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup right there next to the bed. And this was really a cure-all for infants. It was for teething pain and dysentery, and it helped soothe them to sleep if they had colic and things like that. The dosage on the box, it said that for a child under 1 month old, you give 6 to 10 drops, 3 months old, half a teaspoonful, and 6 months old and upwards, a teaspoonful 3 or 4 times daily. So this was marketed even to brand new newborns, infants, so a lot of very young babies were taking this soothing syrup. And in 1868, they actually did publish a report that they had sold 1.5 million bottles the year before, right? So it was very successful. And you can see that they do say it's only 1.5 cents per bottle, okay? So they're not the biggest bottles. They're a lot smaller than the Mrs. Winslow's bottles. But they, were successful because they were readily available and affordable for women who had, young babies. So the ingredients in Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrups was morphine, sodium carbonate, which is like washing soda, spirits phoniculi, which is a type of alcohol, aqua ammonia, which is like an industrial strength cleaner version of ammonia. And then, the equivalent, the morphine level was equivalent to 20 drops of laudanum for every teaspoon of this medicine. At the time, doctors were recommending that the proper dosage of laudanum for 6 months old was 2 to 3 drops. If you followed the correct dosage on the bottle, you would be giving your baby 80 drops a day, the equivalent of 80 drops of laudanum, 40 times the recommended dose by doctors. of laudanum. So the equivalent of laudanum, but giving them just significant amounts of opiates and narcotics. There was another expose that was published in 1911 called Nostrums and Quackeries, right? And nostrums refers to patent medicines. The word nostrum means ours. And it was used to refer to that because it was like, that's our recipe. We're not going to tell you, we're going to keep it a secret. So it's basically like these secrets and these fake medicines. And one of the ones that they called out specifically was Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup. And they wrote that Winslow's soothing syrup, as every physician knows, is one of the morphine-containing baby killers. And then they proceeded to list a number of police reports of reported deaths from children who had died after taking the soothing syrup. Unfortunately, there's no way of really knowing, they weren't all published. People might, if your baby dies, that was a common thing at the time. There wasn't as good, health for children. There was a high infant mortality rate to begin with. So if your baby, fell asleep, didn't wake up, it was tragic, but you might not associate that necessarily with the soothing syrup. But, some people realize, they're like, oh, well, this one in the middle, it's like, oh, I gave them an overdose. I gave them too much of the soothing syrup. So, but this one, the last one, it said in Wyoming, it was a 10-month-old child from the designated dose. So they're following the instructions listed on the box, and there's so much morphine in the bottle that their baby, it kills the children. So, it is believed that thousands of babies died of opiate overdose from Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup. It was designed to help babies go to sleep, and it would help them, soothe them right to sleep, but unfortunately they just didn't always wake up afterwards. And due to high infant mortality, people didn't realize, but it continued to be sold until the 1930s because while if the baby didn't die, it worked. If, they were teething, you could give them some of the soothing syrup and it would make their pain go away because it was full of morphine. If you were giving this to them regularly, they would actually start going through withdrawal symptoms. So you would assume, oh, I have a crying, fussy, colicky baby. You give them the soothing syrup, they'd feel better because they would, get that fix of what they were addicted to. And so they'd stop crying. So, it led to this cycle. It was also recommended for dysentery and diarrhea. And if you have opiates, they're going to give you constipation. So all of a sudden, your baby's no longer got diarrhea, the medicine appears to be working. So because the medicine was working, and because it was very cheap, that earlier advertisement said it was only like 1.5 cents per bottle, and so here, this is a later ad, it's about 25 cents per bottle. It's still a very reasonable price, much more reasonable than trying to see a physician to ask a doctor about how to help your baby. So, it was very quick and easy for women to get, and they didn't know any better, which led to the deaths of a lot of children. And so even after these deaths had been reported, they continued to sell until the 1930s when they were, required by law to cancel this, to prevent the sale of the narcotics with the Second Food and Drug Act. So because of this, Mrs. Winslow is the quack of patent medicine because her product, led to the deaths of lots of babies and continued to be sold despite that knowledge. So patent medicines themselves do have, a very strong legacy here in the US. And one of the biggest ones is actually direct to consumer marketing. So if you watch your TV, you might see ads for, Allegra, Claritin, all these different medicines. They'll just give you a TV ad. That does not happen anywhere else in the world, basically. That's very indicative of the United States. And that's because we were so inundated with all of these patent medicine advertisements that it didn't seem weird to us to keep being advertised to, brand name products. So we're sort of used to these ads, which allows them to sort of like keep going. And that's why we see them all the time today. It also led to the production of generic drugs. So there was pharmacists and doctors and, they were concerned that having these patent medicines, keeping the medicines all a secret is what led to people putting bad stuff in the medicine and led to these overdoses and led to these people being addicted and these, horrible side effects. So they really pushed for the sale of generic drugs. So, if you have a headache and you want some acetaminophen, you can go to pretty much any of the, stores these days and, buy yourself some Tylenol or knock off brand Tylenol. And it's the same. They basically patented it as a generic, brand, so that here's what the formula is. Anyone can make this formula. So that way we don't have to worry about there being, bad stuff or a bad version of it to get people sick. And then, of course, there are also just a lot of different patent medicines that still exist today. So some products started out as patent medicines and then evolved to become, the Coca-Cola, originally did have the cocaine in it. It was offered, oh, it'll help your headache. It'll, perk you right up, get rid of your exhaustion with all that caffeine, things like that. Obviously, it's more just a tasty beverage these days. Bitters, like I said, bitters was one of the really common types of patent medicines, and they would help your stomach issues. And lots of bitters are still sold today, and they're used in things like mixed drinks. And then, of course, there is also this huge market in the US for these sort of patent medicine type products. It's like, oh, it's an immunity shot. It's a smoothie that energizes you. It's, all these different tonics and things that aren't evaluated by the FDA, that aren't really, monitored as much, but might help, based on a lot of these, sort of herbal remedies and things like that. So yeah, hopefully if you guys are able to make it to Ballston Spa, you can check out our pharmacy display, which we have on here, and I'm sitting in front of it right now. So we have, a lot of different pharmacy bottles. We have a lot of patent medicines on display. And then, you can also check out our prescription book that we have down here. So did anyone have any questions?
Well, that was awesome. And I will give folks an opportunity to use the chat feature here on WebEx post questions. There is one. I was gonna, I made a few notes here, and I thought it was interesting. Earlier in the slide, you had a France ointment for, it looks like it was for use of both, and it's an older gentleman with a beard and a horse.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
a lot of the medicines applicable to both man or beast, which kind of reminds me of a journal that we have at the site with a recipe for horse ointment from 1869. You have Hofstadter's that's in there, Patterson Schoharie Crossing, and our canal store. There's a mural that has Hofstadter's bitters as part of the mural in there as well. And I thought it was interesting too, the endorsement of Budweiser. Sort of like, I remember a handful of years ago, I think I'm old enough that I've seen it come and go a few times, where doctors were basically recommending a glass of red wine because of the antioxidant that it helps wine sales quite a bit. And then there was a question up here, and this came in about the time that you were closing out with the patent versus generic, the development from direct marketing. And the question is basically, did the pharmacist know what was in the medicine?
Most pharmacists would not have been able to know specifically, so if they couldn't pick up a bottle, if especially before the Food and Drug Act, it was all a secret, so they didn't know. So the pharmacists would have been, would have pushed for the normal real medicines, because they can't be sure specifically what was in it. And when those exposés were released, they did have to do sort of send it out to a lab and do a scientific analysis to really figure out what was in it. And I did see a question. Yes, they did also use cannabis in a lot of the drugs as well, so that was another common one.
Seems to be the as we closed out, we're talking about the smoothies or these over-the-counter type things. A lot of it having CBD or derivatives in them. be sold over the counter or through the mail.
I can't quite hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry if I dropped out. I was talking about, the occurrence now of like CBD oil being in a lot of things as part of these new over the counter or herbal supplements even.
Yeah, and it's like a lot of that is that same sort of idea of patent medicines that, it's got this in it, it might be good. This has proven effects, but it's not necessarily as potent or as good as an actual medicine that you might get from the doctor.
I thought it was interesting when you were talking about the Revised Act of 1936, and they added cosmetics there, which I think is interesting because in some of the background of things that I've gotten coming across, how there was like uranium in some makeups for women because it helped with their skin. And that obviously was causing other issues to their skin. I don't know if you have some information on that or things in the museum or either bottles or ointments that would have been sold cosmetically.
Um, we do have some, like we don't have like a uranium, skin thing, but we do have some medicines here, or things that are specifically like a hair tonic, or something, or so things like that, which would fall under the line of cosmetics, because they did have that oh, here, the hair balsam, these can all help your hair. You know, different, oh, this is glycerin for your skin. So things like this would have fallen under that cosmetics that you don't necessarily know what's in it. And so they wanted to prevent people from, taking bad things, thinking it's gonna like help their hair heal.
And there's a question coming in about it pertains back to the cannabis question. If you're aware if people are being arrested for using any of those, or it
Um,
could be just in general. This is just did people get arrested for using the ingredients?
yeah, so once, they passed the original, like the first passage and stuff, they were arresting people because they were selling bottles that didn't have all of the ingredients um listed. So every now and then, the government would seize a shipment of bottles and test it to see, like, does this have alcohol? Does this have narcotics? Did they say that on the label? And if they didn't, they would destroy them. And I think they may have gone after the proprietors in some case, but so that is something that was done, that the government did like seize some of the products to make sure that people, didn't get sick from it, if they had uh false advertising on it or weren't properly displaying their ingredients.
Or the reason that we should be grateful that there is regulation on these products. That's something to be mindful of for those that are not regulated as part of that.
I couldn't. I'm sorry, I couldn't really hear you. There wasn't a ton, there wasn't really any regulation on the products before the laws came out. And even then, it's like it took those 30 years. They were just kind of like, well, you have to just say that you have alcohol. And so they didn't really affect people making it. They would just sort of like check every now and then and be like, oh, wait, you have too much alcohol. You have heroin in here that you didn't declare. So we're going to destroy it. And then that usually led to the company getting like shut down. Because it could be expensive, and then it would be in the news that they were lying about their ingredients and stuff. But there wasn't really much regulation, and a lot of things were still sold that should not have been.
So I was checking the chat again. It looks like there aren't any other questions. But I did post the link in the chat room as those that are tuning in for YouTube when this is posted, that'll be down in the description as well. Getting a lot of comments here in the chat about great presenter, great speaker, very good presentation, very informative. And so, Kayla Whitehouse, I want to say thank you very much. I'm glad that I reached out and had a chance to tune in because I get to be a part of it. So thank you very much for this program and all the work that you're doing at the National Bottle Museum in Ballston Spa.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And it was nice to be able to do this again, and get your help, get it like, recorded and stuff. That's good too. So I do appreciate you reaching out and offering me the opportunity to be a part of your lecture series.
Very good. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe and be well.
Thank you.